no harm.
Long before his footsteps touched the ground, the valley already knew he was coming. This land did not welcome strangers. It measured them. Today, they surrounded him without a sound.
The hunt stood still. Wolves moved in the distance. One decision separated instinct from...
Measured them. The days that followed were not kind. His body ached. His pride cracked. The land offered no... When the giant woman placed her hand on his shoulder, it was not a reward. It was recognition.
Imagine walking through a barren landscape, the sun beating down, and coming across a scene so extraordinary it feels like a legend come to life. A lone man, weary from his journey, offers water to a giant Apache woman. He doesn't know her story, yet he chooses compassion over fear. The next morning, he wakes to find 300 warriors surrounding him, curious, cautious, but clearly aware of the unusual bond that formed the day before. What follows is a story of respect, bravery, and the unexpected ways kindness can ripple through the most unlikely corners of the world. This tale challenges our assumptions about strength, courage, and the power of a single, selfless act. Prepare to witness a story where one moment can change everything and where legends of the frontier come alive before your eyes. The morning sun rose over the jagged cliffs, painting the valley in hues of gold and amber. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth and wild sage. A lone traveler, worn from weeks on the trail, trudged toward the center of the valley. Dust clung to his boots and the folds of his coat, yet he moved with purpose. Ahead, a wooden hut stood modestly, framed by the natural amphitheater of the surrounding hills. But it wasn't the hut that drew his attention, it was her. Towering above the normal height of any human, the giant Apache woman stood near a small water trough. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the horizon as if searching for something beyond sight. She was a living legend whispered about by settlers and tribes alike, a figure of awe and mystery. The traveler approached cautiously, raising his hand in a gesture of peace. He carried a canteen, filled with cool water drawn from the nearby creek. "I mean no harm," he said softly, his voice almost swallowed by the vastness around him. The woman's eyes softened as she took a careful step forward. She had seen countless faces, many curious, some hostile, but this one held a rare sincerity. Without a word, she lowered her immense hand, allowing him to pour water into her cupped palms. The liquid glistened under the sun, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Days had hardened the traveler, yet in that instant, he felt a connection deeper than fear or curiosity, an unspoken understanding. The Apache woman drank, her immense form bending slightly to meet the humility of the gesture. The valley was silent except for the faint ripple of wind and the soft sound of water hitting her hands. As she finished, she nodded, a simple motion, yet loaded with meaning. Respect had been established. And in the wilderness, respect could be the difference between life and death. The traveler didn't realize it then, but this moment, small and quiet as it was, had begun to shift the currents of fate in the valley. Word travels swiftly, and legends even swifter. By the next morning, the valley would be unrecognizable. 300 warriors would arrive, each horse's hoof striking the earth like the drumbeat of destiny. But for now, the traveler and the giant woman stood in the quiet of the morning, a bridge between worlds, a testament to courage and empathy. What had begun as a simple act, offering water, would become a story retold for generations. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows, and the valley held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The traveler took a step back, observing the giant woman with a mixture of awe and caution. She was more than a human, she was a force of nature, her presence commanding the valley as if it had been sculpted just for her. Every muscle in her towering frame suggested strength honed by survival, and yet there was a gentleness in her gaze that made his heart pound with both fear and curiosity. He noticed the intricate patterns etched into her clothing, symbols of a rich culture and history, stories woven into every thread. These markings told of battles fought, of ancestors honored, and of a people deeply connected to the land around them. The wind picked up, sending dust swirling in tiny tornadoes around their feet, and the traveler realized the enormity of what he was witnessing. This was no ordinary encounter. He had stumbled into the living legend of the Apache, a story so vast that it had taken decades to even reach the ears of those living beyond these rugged cliffs. For a moment, he considered leaving. Fear whispered that he was intruding, that such encounters could end in disaster. But then he felt a pull, a quiet insistence that this meeting was meant to happen. Compassion had guided his steps so far, now courage would see him through the unknown. He held out his canteen again, offering another sip of water, and this time, the woman accepted without hesitation. The simplicity of the act belied its significance. In the wilderness, such gestures carried weight far beyond the immediate moment. It was trust, offered and received, fragile and yet powerful. The traveler's heart beat in rhythm with the stillness around them, and he felt an unspoken understanding forming, a fragile bond between two very different beings, bound by respect, curiosity, and mutual recognition of strength. As he stood there, he began to notice other details. Small plants sprouted near the edges of the valley, resilient against the harsh terrain. Birds circled overhead, their shadows fleeting against the rocky slopes. Even the sun seemed to linger longer, as if acknowledging the extraordinary moment unfolding below. He realized that the valley itself was a witness, holding its breath for what would come next. Hours passed in silence, though it felt like moments. Every gesture, every glance, was imbued with meaning. The giant woman eventually moved closer to the hut, gesturing for him to follow. He obeyed, stepping carefully over the uneven ground, aware that each step mattered in this delicate dance of trust. Inside the modest hut, the shadows of the morning sun played across the walls, highlighting simple tools and signs of life, proof that even legends live within tangible worlds. She offered him a seat on a carved wooden bench, and though the scale of her world was intimidating, he found himself settling in, absorbing the enormity of the situation. They did not speak, yet communication flowed through the smallest movements, the tilt of a head, the placement of a hand, the quiet acknowledgement of presence. In those moments, words were unnecessary. Understanding passed in the silence, deeper than any conversation could convey. As evening approached, the traveler sensed the shift. The woman stood again, towering above him, and pointed toward the horizon. There, in the distance, small movements could be seen, figures emerging from the valleys and hillsides, mounted on horseback. 300 warriors, as he would soon learn, were making their way toward the valley, drawn by tales of the previous day's extraordinary events. The traveler's heart raced, the anticipation thick in the cooling air. He glanced at the giant woman, seeking guidance. Her eyes met his, calm and unwavering, and he understood. Fear would not serve him now, only courage, respect, and the willingness to meet what came with honesty. The valley itself seemed to hum with expectancy, every stone, every blade of grass a part of the unfolding story. The encounter had begun as a simple act, offering water, but now it was about to transform into something legendary. As twilight painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, the first signs of the warriors became clearer. Their movements were precise, their discipline evident even from a distance. Horses pawed at the ground, warriors adjusted their grips on spears and bows, and the valley's silence was replaced with a low, rolling tension. The traveler's pulse quickened. He was about to step into a chapter of history that few would ever witness firsthand. Yet even amidst the growing tension, there remained a quiet hope, a belief that kindness could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. The giant woman had accepted his help without expectation or judgment, and in doing so, had begun a chain of events that would echo across generations. The traveler felt a profound connection to the land, the people, and the moment itself, a recognition that sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest weight. As night fell and the stars emerged, the valley seemed to hold its breath. The giant Apache woman stood like a sentinel, the traveler at her side, both ready for whatever was to come. Tomorrow, the warriors would arrive. Tomorrow, the story would unfold in ways neither could fully predict. And tomorrow, a simple act of kindness would prove that courage, respect, and humanity are forces stronger than any weapon. The traveler could hardly sleep that night, though he tried. The enormity of what he had witnessed replayed in his mind. The sheer presence of the giant Apache woman, her calm and commanding aura, and the silent understanding they had shared. He wondered about her life, the stories etched into her garments, and the countless trials she must have faced to reach such a formidable stature. The hut, simple and unassuming, felt like a fortress in the quiet darkness. The fire inside cast flickering shadows on the walls, and the traveler could hear the faint sounds of the valley settling into the night, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, and the wind weaving between the rocks. Despite the danger that loomed with the arrival of the warriors, there was a serenity in that moment, a pause before the storm. He thought about the thousands of stories he had heard from settlers, traders, and scouts, stories of encounters with legendary figures of the Apache tribes. Most were warnings or tales of danger, but here he was, witnessing something extraordinary, a meeting defined not by fear or aggression, but by mutual respect. The water he had offered was more than sustenance, it was a bridge. As he drifted into a restless sleep, the giant woman remained vigilant. Her gaze swept the horizon even in the moonlight, her instincts sharp, honed over years of surviving a harsh land. The traveler realized that her strength was not only in her size, but in her awareness, patience, and ability to command attention without a single raised voice. He understood, finally, why the legend spoke of her in hushed reverence. Hours later, before dawn, he was awakened by a distant sound, the faint thudding of hooves. His heart raced as he peered out of the hut. The valley, which had seemed so empty, was coming alive with movement. Shadows grew longer and larger, revealing the figures of mounted warriors making their way across the rocky terrain. There were far more than he expected, and yet the giant woman remained calm, her presence a stabilizing force against the rising tide of tension. She gestured for him to follow, and he stepped carefully beside her, aware of the smallness of his form compared to hers. Every movement seemed deliberate, measured, as if the valley itself had been rehearsing this encounter for centuries. The warriors, noticing her, slowed their pace, curiosity and caution blending in their expressions. The traveler's mind raced, but he trusted her judgment. She had accepted his kindness, and now she would guide the outcome. As they reached the edge of the clearing, the full scope of the scene became clear. Hundreds of warriors, horses prancing and muscles taut, formed a semicircle around the hut. Their eyes were fixed on the giant woman, some in awe, some in skepticism. The traveler swallowed hard, realizing he was standing at the center of a story that would be told long after he was gone. His simple act, offering water, had set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The air was thick with anticipation. The giant woman lifted her hand, and the valley seemed to still. There was a moment, fleeting yet eternal, when all eyes were on her. Then, with a graceful motion, she nodded toward the traveler, signaling that he was under her protection. The warriors, reading her gestures, exchanged cautious glances but held their ground. Respect had been established, and in this land, respect was stronger than fear. The traveler exhaled, feeling the tension ease slightly, yet he knew the true challenge was only beginning. The valley was no longer silent, it was alive with expectation, energy, and history in the making. He glanced at the giant woman, understanding that tomorrow would be pivotal. The stories of the Apache, the power of human connection, and the strength found in acts of kindness would converge in a way that would leave a lasting mark on everyone present. He realized then that this was more than survival. It was a lesson in courage, empathy, and the unforeseen power of compassion. The giant woman had accepted his help without hesitation, and the warrior's arrival was proof that one selfless act could ripple outward in ways no one could anticipate. He felt a deep gratitude for the opportunity to witness such a moment, and a renewed sense of purpose to act with honor in the days to come. As the first hints of dawn colored the horizon, the traveler and the giant woman stood side by side, watching the valley awaken around them. The journey had begun with water, yet it would not end there. The events of the coming day would test courage, wisdom, and the bonds formed in moments of true understanding. And as the sun rose, the valley, the travelers, and the warriors prepared for the encounter that would become legend. The first light of morning painted the valley in shades of pink and gold, illuminating the rugged cliffs and the layered hills that cradled the small wooden hut. From the distance, a rhythmic thundering broke the silence, a sound that grew louder by the minute. Horses' hooves pounded against the hard earth in unison, and the traveler's heart began to race. The 300 warriors were coming. As they rounded the last hill, the full scale of the gathering became clear. Mounted on powerful horses, adorned with feathers, leather, and painted symbols of their tribes, the warriors formed a massive, semicircular formation around the clearing. Their eyes were sharp, scanning every inch of the valley, alert to the slightest movement. The traveler felt the weight of their gaze settle upon him like a storm about to break. The giant Apache woman stepped forward, her immense figure casting a shadow over the valley floor. The warriors noticed her immediately, some murmuring in awe, others shifting uneasily on their mounts. She raised her hand, and a hush fell across the semicircle. Even the wind seemed to pause, as though the valley itself was holding its breath in respect. The traveler followed her lead, walking toward the center of the clearing. He felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Fear for the unknown, and anticipation for what this encounter could mean. Every footstep was measured, every motion deliberate, and yet, he felt an unusual calm. There was a sense of inevitability here, as if the events unfolding had been written long before he arrived. A warrior at the front of the formation dismounted, a tall man with sharp eyes and a stern expression. He moved with confidence, yet there was caution in his posture. The giant woman spoke, her voice deep and resonant, carrying across the valley. Though the traveler could not understand the language, he felt the authority and clarity in every word. The warriors exchanged glances, their movements slowing as they processed her commands. One by one, they dismounted, placing hands on their chests in a gesture of acknowledgement. The valley was now silent again, but this silence was different, tense, expectant, as if the air itself anticipated the moment of truth. The traveler stepped forward, holding his hands open, a universal sign of peace. The giant woman gave him a slight nod, reassuring him that he was protected under her presence. The warrior's eyes shifted to him, some skeptical, some curious. The tension was palpable, and the traveler knew that the next moments would define how this meeting unfolded. One of the warriors, likely a leader among them, approached cautiously. His horse snorted and stamped the ground nervously, reflecting the underlying tension. The giant woman raised her hand again, signaling him to stop. The warrior hesitated, then dismounted, bowing slightly before stepping closer to the giant woman. There was a quiet exchange, a conversation carried in gestures, nods, and subtle movements. The traveler observed, fascinated by the unspoken language of respect and authority. The warrior's expression softened, and he turned to address the others. Slowly, the formation began to relax. Horses nickered softly, warriors adjusted their grips on weapons, and the heavy tension began to lift. The traveler realized that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The power of leadership, respect, and trust communicated without a single word spoken. As the sun climbed higher, the valley transformed into a living tableau of history in motion. The warriors began to spread out slightly, forming a protective perimeter around the hut and the giant woman. Their disciplined movements revealed training, experience, and a deep connection to the land. The traveler marveled at their coordination, understanding that this was more than a mere gathering, it was a demonstration of unity, strength, and vigilance. The giant woman approached him, her massive hand resting briefly on his shoulder. He felt a surge of courage and reassurance. This simple gesture, combined with the presence of the warriors, gave him the confidence to step fully into the unfolding story. He realized that their arrival was not a threat, but an opportunity to witness, to learn, and to be part of something far greater than himself. 4 hours, the warriors and the traveler remained in the clearing, a tense yet respectful standoff. The giant woman moved among them, inspecting, acknowledging, and ensuring that all eyes remained focused on the purpose of their gathering. Her authority was absolute, and the warriors responded with loyalty, understanding, and discipline. By mid-morning, the tension had shifted into a cautious curiosity. The warriors began to engage in subtle gestures. Some approached the hut, others studied the traveler, and a few even mimicked the respectful hand gestures the giant woman had used. The traveler felt a sense of wonder and relief. What began as a potentially dangerous encounter had transformed into a historic moment of understanding. The valley was alive with the sounds of horses, whispers, and the occasional laughter of warriors testing boundaries. The giant woman's commanding presence ensured that no conflict arose, and her silent guidance helped bridge the gap between curiosity and trust. The traveler realized that he was witnessing not only a meeting of people but a merging of cultures, an encounter that transcended fear and suspicion. As the day progressed, the warriors began to settle, forming groups, sharing water, and tending to their horses. The giant woman watched over them, occasionally glancing at the traveler with a knowing smile. Though he could not understand her words, he felt her approval and encouragement. She had transformed the valley from a place of potential danger into a space of respect, learning, and connection. By late afternoon, the initial tension had dissipated entirely. The warriors now moved with purpose, some seeking to understand the traveler's intentions, others observing the giant woman with admiration and reverence. The valley, once silent and still, had become a living testament to courage, kindness, and the profound effects of a single selfless act. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the traveler felt a deep sense of accomplishment and gratitude. He had arrived as a stranger, offering water, and now stood in the midst of a historic gathering, protected and respected by both legend and hundreds of warriors. He realized that moments like these were rare, moments that could change the course of history, if only one had the courage to act with empathy and honor. The giant woman stood tall against the setting sun, her figure outlined in gold and shadow. The warriors looked to her for guidance, the traveler looked to her for reassurance, and the valley itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Tomorrow, the story would continue, but tonight, they had all witnessed the power of courage, compassion, and respect. As the afternoon unfolded, the warriors began to disperse slightly, forming smaller clusters around the clearing. Some approached the hut, curious about the lone traveler who had dared to approach the legendary giant woman. Others studied the valley itself, the layered hills and rocky outcroppings, as if mapping the terrain for future strategy. Each movement was careful, disciplined, yet tinged with fascination. The traveler noticed subtle exchanges between the warriors, the passing of water, quiet murmurs, gestures of respect toward the giant woman. He realized that these were not merely warriors on patrol or for show, they were a tightly knit community bound by loyalty, honor, and centuries of tradition. Every motion, from the way they adjusted their saddles to how they scanned the horizon, spoke of experience and cohesion. The giant woman, standing tall in the center of the valley, seemed to command not only their attention but their admiration. She walked among them, her steps deliberate, each movement demonstrating authority tempered with wisdom. Some warriors lowered their heads slightly as she passed, a sign of respect to her stature and presence. Others whispered quietly to each other, the traveler catching fragments of words he couldn't fully understand, yet the tone conveyed a mix of awe and approval. For the traveler, every moment was a lesson. He observed the warriors' interactions and the silent leadership of the giant woman, realizing how carefully relationships, respect, and trust were cultivated. It was a stark contrast to the brutal tales he had heard from other parts of the frontier. Here, strength was not demonstrated by aggression alone. It was measured in patience, communication, and the ability to protect without unnecessary violence. As the sun climbed higher, a few warriors approached the traveler cautiously. Their movements were hesitant but not hostile. One stepped forward, hands open in a gesture of peace. Though he could not understand the language, the traveler sensed curiosity and the desire to communicate. The giant woman watched closely, her presence ensuring that the encounter remained respectful and safe. The traveler offered a nod and a small smile, attempting to convey goodwill. The warrior hesitated, then returned the gesture. Slowly, more warriors approached, forming a semicircle around him, mirroring the larger formation that had first arrived. The traveler felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He was now fully part of this extraordinary encounter, standing at the center of a story few would ever witness. By late afternoon, the valley had transformed from a scene of tension to one of quiet engagement. The warriors tended to their horses, shared water, and observed the traveler with cautious curiosity. The giant woman remained their anchor, her calm authority guiding the interactions and preventing any misunderstandings. It was a delicate balance, maintained through silent communication, gestures, and the shared understanding of respect. The traveler realized that the day's events were more than a test of courage. They were a lesson in diplomacy, empathy, and the profound impact of a single act of kindness. Offering water to the giant woman had set in motion a series of events that none could have predicted. And now, surrounded by warriors who had come to respect both him and the giant woman, he felt the weight and significance of that choice more than ever. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, the atmosphere shifted once again. The warriors regrouped, forming a protective perimeter around the hut and the giant woman. They moved with coordinated precision, a display of skill and discipline that left the traveler in awe. It was clear that any threat to this valley would be met with formidable strength, yet he also sensed that the warriors were not merely guarding, they were witnessing history in the making. In the quiet moments between movements, the traveler took a deep breath, allowing the enormity of the scene to settle in. He had entered this valley as a stranger, offering a simple act of kindness. Now, he stood in the midst of a powerful gathering, protected and guided by a figure of legend and hundreds of disciplined warriors. The valley, once silent and still, had become alive with respect, curiosity, and anticipation for what the coming day would bring. As night approached, the giant woman led the traveler to a vantage point overlooking the valley. Together, they watched the warriors settle, fires being lit, and horses being tended. The valley glowed with a mix of natural light and flickering flames, creating an almost mystical ambience. The traveler realized that this moment would remain etched in his memory forever, a rare intersection of courage, empathy, and the awe-inspiring power of respect. The giant woman spoke softly, and though he could not understand her words, he felt their intent. She was preparing him for what lay ahead, signaling that tomorrow would be crucial. The warrior's presence was not merely ceremonial. They had come to witness, judge, and perhaps even accept him into their world. The traveler felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, but he also understood that the foundation had been laid. The respect he had shown, combined with the giant woman's authority, had created a bridge between worlds that few could traverse. As darkness fell over the valley, the traveler sat quietly, observing the fires, the warriors, and the giant woman. He reflected on the incredible chain of events set in motion by a single act of kindness. Tomorrow, the valley would witness further interaction, and the story would deepen, revealing lessons of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond formed through respect. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had already become part of something far greater than himself. As the night deepened, the valley settled into a hushed rhythm, the only sounds the soft neighing of horses, the crackle of distant fires, and the occasional whisper of warriors communicating in low tones. The traveler watched from his vantage point beside the giant woman, feeling a strange mix of awe and responsibility. Every glance from the warriors carried weight. They were evaluating him, their curiosity tempered with centuries of instinct and experience. The giant woman moved with ease among the warriors, her towering figure casting long shadows under the flickering firelight. She spoke softly, and though he could not understand her words, the traveler sensed their meaning in the gestures, the nods, and the attentive silence of the warriors. She was instructing, guiding, and maintaining order in a delicate balance, ensuring that respect remained at the forefront of every interaction. Some warriors approached the traveler cautiously, hands outstretched in gestures of tentative friendship. He responded with small nods and smiles, offering reassurance through body language. One young warrior, braver than the rest, stepped closer, attempting to communicate through simple motions. The traveler mimicked the gestures, creating a rudimentary form of dialogue that slowly built understanding. Others watched, learning from the interaction, their expressions shifting from suspicion to curiosity. The giant woman remained nearby, observing with quiet pride. Her eyes reflected both strength and approval, reminding the traveler that he was under her protection. Her presence radiated authority, and he realized that without her, this encounter might have ended in conflict rather than connection. He felt gratitude for her guidance and for the subtle ways she communicated, bridging the gap between two very different worlds. As hours passed, the warriors began to relax further. Small conversations emerged, horses were groomed, and water was shared among the groups. The traveler observed their discipline and organization. It was clear that these were not merely warriors of strength but of intelligence, strategy, and deep cultural understanding. He marveled at their ability to coordinate without apparent chaos, maintaining a delicate balance between curiosity, vigilance, and respect. The giant woman eventually led the traveler closer to the campfires where the warriors had gathered. She gestured for him to sit, and a few warriors stepped back respectfully, allowing him space. He could see the intricate patterns on their clothing, symbols of lineage and achievement, and realized that each warrior carried stories of battles, survival, and honor. The valley had transformed into a living museum of human courage and tradition. One of the elders, a tall warrior with gray streaks in his hair and a calm, measured presence, approached. He spoke slowly, and though the traveler could not understand the words, the tone was deliberate and respectful. The giant woman translated through gestures, guiding the traveler to respond in kind. It was a slow, careful process, but over time, understanding began to emerge, a shared acknowledgement of mutual respect and curiosity. Meanwhile, scouts moved along the edges of the valley, their eyes scanning the hillsides and distant ridges. The traveler noted their precision and attentiveness, realizing that every movement served a purpose. The giant woman occasionally nodded to the scouts, giving subtle instructions that maintained the perimeter without creating alarm. The valley was alive with strategy, yet beneath it all lay the unspoken bond formed by the simple act of offering water the previous day. As midnight approached, a quiet tension returned to the clearing. Fires glowed faintly, shadows dancing across the rugged terrain. The traveler could feel the weight of the warrior's attention, each glance measuring him, testing him, but not in hostility, rather in assessment. The giant woman stood beside him, her presence a shield and a guide. He understood that the night would be long, filled with observation and quiet learning, preparing him for the trials that tomorrow might bring. In the deep silence, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had traversed dangerous lands, faced uncertainty and hardship, yet nothing compared to this moment of living legend meeting reality. He thought of the Apache woman's eyes, sharp and penetrating, and the unspoken trust she had extended. That trust had set in motion a chain of events that he could barely comprehend but could feel in every fiber of his being. Slowly, the valley began to rest. Warriors leaned against their horses, heads bowed in meditation or sleep. The traveler found a spot near the fire, feeling the warmth against the cold night air. He allowed himself a moment of peace, absorbing the enormity of what had occurred, the gathering of 300 warriors, the presence of a legendary figure, and his role in this unfolding story. Yet even in rest, the traveler remained vigilant. He knew that the coming day would be pivotal. The giant woman's guidance had been clear. Respect, caution, and understanding would dictate the interactions that lay ahead. He felt a quiet determination to honor that trust, to act with integrity, and to meet the challenges of tomorrow with courage. As the first hints of dawn began to light the sky, the valley exhaled. The fires burned low, shadows receded, and the warriors prepared for the day ahead. The giant woman stood at the center of the clearing, watching the horizon, her figure silhouetted against the rising sun. The traveler stood beside her, ready to face whatever awaited, knowing that the bond forged by a single act of kindness would guide him through the trials to come. Tomorrow, the warriors would move closer, questions would be asked, and understanding would deepen. But tonight, the valley rested, the legend of the giant Apache woman remained unbroken, and the traveler had proven that courage and respect could create bridges even in the most unlikely of places. The stage was set, the players in position, and the story of this extraordinary encounter was far from over. The morning sun broke over the valley, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. The fires of the previous night had dwindled, leaving only faint wisps of smoke curling into the sky. The 300 warriors were awake, moving with precision and purpose, tending to their horses and preparing for the day. The traveler, standing beside the giant Apache woman, felt both awe and anticipation. Today, he would interact directly with the warriors, bridging the gap between legend and reality. The giant woman approached him, her towering frame imposing yet reassuring. She gestured for him to follow her, and he stepped carefully, mindful of the uneven ground. As they moved toward the nearest cluster of warriors, the traveler noticed the intricate tattoos, feathers, and painted symbols adorning each individual. Every mark told a story, of lineage, accomplishments, and the trials they had survived. He felt a profound respect for the depth of culture before him. A small group of warriors approached, led by the elder who had observed him the previous night. The giant woman stopped, nodding toward the travelers, signaling that he was under her protection. One of the warriors stepped forward, bowing slightly in acknowledgement. Though the traveler could not understand the words, he returned the gesture, offering a respectful nod and a small smile. It was a simple exchange, but one filled with meaning. The warrior motioned for him to sit beside the fire, a sign of acceptance. As he did, the giant woman remained standing, her gaze sweeping over the valley, ensuring all was well. The traveler noticed the subtle interactions among the warriors, the passing of water, quiet conversations, and cautious glances toward him. Slowly, suspicion turned into curiosity, and curiosity began to transform into tentative trust. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, holding a small carved wooden object. He extended it toward the traveler with both hands, a gesture of welcome and friendship. The traveler accepted it carefully, examining the intricate carvings that depicted stories of battles, hunts, and ancestral wisdom. Though he did not fully understand the symbols, he felt the weight of their significance. This was more than a gift, it was an invitation to be part of their world, even if only temporarily. The giant woman gestured for him to observe closely, and the traveler watched as the warrior explained the carvings to the elder. Though the words were foreign, the gestures were universal. He began to understand that communication here was not solely dependent on language. Respect, patience, and observation could convey meaning more powerfully than words alone. As the morning progressed, the traveler was invited to participate in small rituals, gestures of respect, offerings of food and water, and demonstrations of skills. He watched the warriors teach each other, passing down knowledge and techniques honed over generations. The giant woman guided him patiently, correcting his posture, showing him how to hold a weapon correctly, and encouraging him to interact with the warriors with humility and care. The traveler learned quickly that each movement mattered. A slight misstep could be interpreted as disrespect, while a thoughtful gesture could earn trust and admiration. He felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that his actions reflected not only on himself but also on the respect he had shown the giant woman. Every interaction was a test of character, patience, and understanding. By midday, the traveler had begun to grasp some of the subtle customs of the warriors. He learned how to bow his head, when to offer a hand in greeting, and how to show appreciation for their guidance. The giant woman remained nearby, observing and correcting silently, her presence a constant reminder of the delicate balance he must maintain. The warriors gradually grew more relaxed around him. Laughter occasionally rippled through the clusters, and the traveler even joined in, feeling a rare moment of connection. For the first time since his arrival, he sensed that he was not merely a guest but a participant in their community, bound together by mutual respect and shared experience. As the sun climbed higher, a few warriors demonstrated their skills: archery, tracking, and horseback maneuvers. The traveler watched, fascinated by their precision and agility. The giant woman occasionally nodded in approval, subtly guiding him to notice details, patterns, and lessons hidden in the movements. He realized that every skill carried meaning, a story of survival, strategy, and culture passed down through generations. By late afternoon, the traveler had formed tentative bonds with several of the warriors. They approached him without hesitation, sharing water, food, and small stories through gestures and drawings in the dirt. He learned the rhythm of their communication, the flow of respect and trust that guided every interaction. The giant woman observed, occasionally interjecting with corrections or encouragement, ensuring that the delicate network of understanding remained intact. As evening approached, the warriors gathered in a larger circle around the fire. The giant woman stepped to the center, raising her hand to signal attention. The traveler noticed the deep respect in the way the warriors leaned in, eyes focused, as if awaiting instruction or insight. Though he could not understand her words fully, he sensed the intent: unity, respect, and preparation for what lay ahead. The traveler reflected on the extraordinary journey so far. He had entered the valley as a stranger, offering a simple act of kindness, and now he stood amidst 300 warriors, forming bonds that transcended language and culture. He understood that true strength was not measured solely by physical might but by courage, empathy, and the willingness to connect with others. As night fell, the warrior circle settled, fires flickered, and the valley grew quiet. The traveler felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had taken the first steps toward being accepted, even in a world far removed from his own. The giant woman's presence remained a guiding light, her wisdom and authority shaping the valley into a space of trust, learning, and connection. As the evening wore on, the traveler found himself moving among the warriors, observing the intricate rituals and daily routines that governed their lives. Some were engaged in repairing gear, others tended to horses, and a few practiced archery with remarkable precision. He watched closely, noting the subtle techniques that spoke of years of discipline and ancestral knowledge. Each movement was deliberate, purposeful, and respectful of both the individual and the group. The giant woman guided him through the customs, demonstrating the proper ways to approach elders, offer assistance, and show respect during communal activities. He learned that even a simple gesture, a lowered gaze, a careful placement of a hand on the ground, could communicate humility and acknowledgement of experience. The traveler felt a growing appreciation for the depth of understanding embedded in these practices, realizing that respect was a language spoken universally across cultures. A young warrior approached him cautiously, holding a small bundle of herbs. With careful gestures, the traveler understood that they were meant for cleansing and protection, a traditional offering of goodwill. He accepted them with gratitude, bowing slightly in recognition. The giant woman nodded approvingly, signaling that he was learning not only the customs but the significance behind them. The traveler then joined a small group engaged in storytelling. One warrior traced figures in the dirt, depicting past hunts, battles, and lessons learned. The traveler tried to mimic the drawings, using lines and shapes to share snippets of his own life and journey. Laughter and approving nods followed, and for a moment, language barriers dissolved entirely. He realized that stories, when shared with sincerity, could bridge worlds just as effectively as words. As night deepened, a fire was lit at the center of the clearing, and the warriors gathered around it in concentric circles. The giant woman remained at the center, her presence commanding yet nurturing. She gestured for the traveler to sit nearby, signaling that he was welcome but must remain observant. He watched as the warriors performed a series of ceremonial movements, their actions both precise and symbolic. The traveler observed the elders closely, noting how they instructed younger warriors in the use of weapons, hunting techniques, and strategies for survival. Every demonstration was paired with lessons of patience, respect, and teamwork. He felt honored to witness such a detailed passing of knowledge, understanding that these moments were the lifeblood of the community, ensuring the continuity of tradition and the preservation of culture. Later, the giant woman approached him again, guiding him to a quiet spot near the edge of the valley. She pointed toward the warriors and then toward the horizon, as if to convey the importance of observation and awareness. The traveler nodded, understanding that being part of this world required not only participation but careful attention to the environment, the people, and the subtle signals that shaped interactions. Some warriors joined them, curious about the traveler's progress in understanding their ways. They demonstrated small skills, how to tie knots, track footprints, and identify edible plants. The traveler mimicked their movements, occasionally fumbling but receiving patient corrections and encouragement. He realized that respect was a continuous practice, earned and reinforced through effort, observation, and humility. As the night progressed, he began to sense a growing sense of acceptance. The warriors no longer observed him solely with caution. There were smiles, small gestures of camaraderie, and shared moments of quiet understanding. Even the youngest warriors seemed eager to engage, learning from his attempts to participate and responding to his genuine efforts with warmth. The giant woman watched all this closely, her expressions revealing pride and approval. She understood that the traveler's presence was changing the dynamic in subtle ways, fostering curiosity, engagement, and perhaps even a new level of unity among the warriors. By demonstrating respect, patience, and humility, he had become a bridge between worlds, a living example of how kindness and courage could transcend fear and suspicion. As midnight approached, the valley settled into a rhythm of quiet reflection. Fires burned low, casting dancing shadows on the rocky terrain. The traveler sat near the giant woman, absorbing the lessons of the day and reflecting on the extraordinary journey he had undertaken. He realized that this was more than survival or adventure. It was a lesson in humanity, empathy, and the profound impact of respect and understanding. Before finally resting, the giant woman gestured toward the stars, indicating the passage of time and the enduring presence of those who had come before. The traveler felt a connection to the generations of warriors, elders, and leaders whose wisdom had shaped this valley. He understood that his role, though temporary, was part of a continuum, a small thread in a vast tapestry of history and legend. With the warriors sleeping or resting near their fires, the traveler allowed himself a moment of gratitude and reflection. He had begun as an outsider, but through observation, participation, and respect, he had become part of this extraordinary community. The giant woman's guidance had been unwavering, and her lessons had ensured that he not only survived but grew, learning the values, customs, and unspoken codes that defined their way of life. The morning air was sharp and crisp, carrying the scent of the valley's wild grasses and distant pine. The sun had just begun to rise, spilling golden light across the rocky cliffs and the small wooden hut. The traveler awoke with a sense of anticipation. Today, he knew, would not be like the previous days of observation and cautious interaction. Today, he would be tested. The giant woman appeared beside him, her towering figure casting a long shadow across the clearing. She did not speak, but her gestures were clear. Follow her and be prepared. The traveler rose, adjusting his clothes and checking his belongings. Though he had learned much from the warriors, he knew that true acceptance required more than curiosity and respect. It required courage. As they moved toward the center of the valley, the 300 warriors had already formed a large semicircle, their expressions serious and focused. The fires from the previous night had been extinguished, and the valley was bathed in early sunlight. The traveler felt the weight of their gaze settle on him like the pressure of a mountain. Every eye seemed to measure him, assessing his readiness, his strength, and his sincerity. The giant woman stopped and raised her hand, signaling for silence. She stepped aside, allowing the traveler to stand alone in the center. A ripple of tension passed through the warriors, and even from this distance, he could feel their anticipation. This was a test, not just of physical ability, but of character, patience, and respect. A group of warriors approached, carrying weapons carefully balanced but not threatening. The traveler recognized bows, spears, and shields, their craftsmanship intricate and formidable. The lead warrior stepped forward, his eyes locking onto the travelers. There was no hostility, only a firm expectation: prove your courage or remain forever outside their trust. The giant woman gestured for the traveler to respond. He nodded, swallowing the lump of anxiety in his throat. Courage, he realized, was not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite it. The warriors circled him slowly, each movement deliberate, their eyes never leaving his form. He felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with an odd calm, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. The first part of the challenge was simple yet profound. The traveler was asked to demonstrate his ability to remain still and observant under pressure. He stood firm, aware of every movement around him, every subtle shift in the warrior's stance. Sweat formed on his brow, not from exertion, but from concentration. The warriors watched silently, testing his focus and composure. Next, he was asked to perform a series of gestures that conveyed respect and understanding. The giant woman guided him subtly, indicating when to bow slightly, when to extend a hand, and how to maintain eye contact without aggression. The traveler mimicked her gestures carefully, aware that even a small mistake could be misinterpreted. Each movement he made was measured, intentional, and filled with sincerity. The warriors then introduced an element of skill, an archery test designed to assess his coordination, patience, and steadiness. The traveler picked up the bow offered to him, noting its weight and balance. He recalled the lessons he had observed over the previous days, the importance of breath, stance, and focus. With careful aim, he drew the string and released the arrow. It struck the target, not perfectly centered, but accurate enough to earn a nod from the giant woman. Encouragement followed, a subtle acknowledgement of his effort and determination. The test continued with physical agility. He was asked to climb a rocky outcropping while balancing a small weight, simulating the challenges faced by warriors navigating the valley's terrain. Every step required focus and caution, and he could feel the eyes of all 300 warriors on him. Yet with patience, careful movement, and a steady heart, he reached the top. The giant woman's nod signaled success, and the tension in the valley shifted from scrutiny to acknowledgement. Finally, the test culminated in a demonstration of empathy and decision-making. The traveler was presented with a scenario, a simulated conflict where he had to choose between two courses of action, each affecting the safety of a small group of warriors and animals. He paused, reflecting on the lessons he had learned from observing the warriors and the giant woman. With careful consideration, he made a choice that prioritized protection, collaboration, and respect. The lead warrior smiled, signaling that he had passed the final test. The valley erupted, not in noise, but in subtle acknowledgement. Warriors nodded, murmurs of approval circulated, and the atmosphere transformed from tense evaluation to quiet celebration. The traveler exhaled, relief washing over him, tempered by the awareness of the responsibility now entrusted to him. The giant woman approached, placing her hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of pride and acceptance. By midday, the traveler had not only proven his courage but had begun to earn the warriors' trust. They approached him more freely, offering water, sharing knowledge, and even teasing him lightly in the way communities do when one has been accepted. The giant woman remained a guiding presence, her eyes reflecting pride and reassurance. She had not only tested his abilities but had also taught him the value of patience, respect, and thoughtful action. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the traveler reflected on the experience. Courage was not about strength alone, but about mindfulness, respect, and the willingness to face fear with sincerity. The warriors had tested him, the giant woman had guided him, and through this process, he had begun to understand the deeper values that governed life in this extraordinary valley. By evening, the valley had returned to a calm rhythm. Fires were lit, horses tended, and warriors shared stories of past challenges and triumphs. The traveler sat beside the giant woman, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and belonging. He had entered the valley as an outsider, tested by circumstance and tradition, and had emerged not only accepted but respected. The night sky stretched across the valley in a vast canopy of stars. The giant woman gestured toward the heavens, and though he could not understand her words, the traveler felt the meaning. Strength comes not only from action but from awareness, respect, and connection. The test of courage was complete, but the lessons would endure, shaping his actions in the days to come. The valley remained quiet after the initial tests, yet a subtle tension lingered in the air. The traveler knew that acceptance among the warriors was not immediate. It was earned through continued demonstration of respect, humility, and courage. The giant woman gestured for him to follow, leading him to a small clearing where a few younger warriors waited with tools, bows, and ropes. "You will continue," she signaled with a sweep of her hand, "until they see your heart as well as your skill." Though he could not understand her words directly, her tone and gestures conveyed encouragement, challenge, and trust. The traveler nodded, realizing that this next phase was not only about physical skill but about emotional intelligence, about understanding the warrior's way of life and showing that he could honor it. The first task was subtle yet revealing. He was asked to assist in guiding horses through a narrow, rocky path. The animals were skittish, sensitive to the slightest touch or sound. One misstep could send them tumbling or panicking. The traveler felt the weight of responsibility and carefully mimicked the movements he had observed the previous day. He spoke softly to the horses, moved deliberately, and watched the reactions of the young warriors beside him. Each step demanded patience, attention, and calm. When the last horse safely reached the designated spot, the giant woman nodded approvingly, and the warriors murmured in approval. Next, the traveler joined a small group in tracking simulated signs across the valley. Footprints, broken twigs, and disturbed rocks designed to test observation and patience. Every detail mattered. Every glance could reveal a hidden clue. He moved slowly, scanning the ground, noticing subtle patterns, and communicating observations through gestures. The warriors watched, some leaning in to compare notes, others whispering to one another. When the group reached the final marker successfully, the traveler's careful attention and understanding had earned a subtle acknowledgement, a respectful nod from each observing warrior. By midday, the challenge shifted from skill to judgment. The giant woman presented a scenario involving a dispute between two warriors over territory and resources. The traveler was asked to mediate, demonstrating fairness, empathy, and adherence to cultural protocols. He recalled the lessons from the past days: observation, patience, and respect for hierarchy. Using gestures, calm demeanor, and careful listening, he guided the warriors toward mutual understanding. The resolution was peaceful, and murmurs of approval swept through the surrounding group. Even the elder who had first approached him seemed impressed by his measured response. The final portion of the test was both physical and symbolic. He was asked to climb a steep rock face carrying a small bundle of provisions to a lookout point. The climb was treacherous, demanding strength, balance, and careful planning. With every step, the traveler felt the eyes of the warriors and the giant woman upon him, reminding him that this was as much about perseverance and focus as it was about courage. Reaching the top, he placed the bundle carefully and stood, catching his breath. The giant woman's approving nod was accompanied by a quiet, almost imperceptible smile. Descending, the traveler realized that the test was more than physical. It was a comprehensive measure of character. Courage was intertwined with respect, skill with humility, and success with the ability to act thoughtfully under observation. The warriors who had once viewed him with suspicion now approached with measured curiosity, offering small gestures of camaraderie, guidance, and conversation. By late afternoon, the valley had transformed from a place of evaluation into one of subtle celebration. Fires were lit, horses were tended, and warriors shared stories of past challenges and triumphs. The traveler found himself seated beside the giant woman, reflecting on the day's events. He understood that each test, each task, and each interaction was a lesson in trust, respect, and mutual understanding, a lesson far beyond what he had expected when he first arrived. As evening approached, the warriors formed a semicircle around the clearing, signaling the end of the day's challenges. The giant woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. She gestured for the traveler to stand at the center once more. The murmurs of the warriors grew softer, yet the weight of their attention was palpable. With a sweep of her hand, she indicated that he had completed the tests to the satisfaction of the community. The valley exhaled. The tension dissolved into a quiet acknowledgement, the warriors exchanging nods and whispers of approval. The traveler felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just in passing the tests, but in earning the respect of those who had once regarded him as an outsider. The giant woman placed her massive hand on his shoulder once more, a gesture of pride, affirmation, and silent congratulations. As the night settled over the valley, the traveler sat near the fire with several of the younger warriors, sharing water, food, and simple gestures of camaraderie. Laughter began to ripple through the group, small stories were exchanged, and the traveler felt a deep sense of belonging. The giant woman remained nearby, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. She had guided him through the tests not just to assess him, but to prepare him for the life, challenges, and relationships that lay ahead in the valley. The stars emerged, shimmering across the vast night sky, and the traveler reflected on the lessons of the day. Courage was not merely strength, it was patience, understanding, and the willingness to act with integrity. Respect was not only shown in gestures but in attention, empathy, and humility. And trust, he realized, was earned slowly, through consistency, sincerity, and openness to learning. The giant woman gestured toward the horizon, signaling that tomorrow would bring new challenges, deeper interactions, and opportunities to prove his commitment further. The traveler felt a quiet determination. He would honor the trust bestowed upon him, act with respect, and continue to grow in both skill and understanding. The valley, once tense and watchful, now rested in a calm rhythm. Fires glowed softly, warriors settled for the night, and the traveler sat beside the giant woman, ready to embrace whatever lessons the next day would bring. Section 4 was nearing its close, but its impact on him, and the bonds he had begun to forge, would last far longer than the challenges themselves. The first light of dawn spread across the valley, illuminating the rugged cliffs and rocky outcroppings in a warm, golden hue. The traveler rose with anticipation, his body still sore from the challenges of the previous day, but his mind alert and eager. Today marked the beginning of his active participation with the warriors, moving from observation and testing to direct involvement in their daily lives. The giant woman approached him silently, her presence commanding yet reassuring. She gestured toward the group of warriors assembling near the edge of the valley. Some carried bows and arrows, others had small packs of provisions, while a few led horses prepared for long journeys. It was clear that today would involve movement, coordination, and practical application of the lessons he had learned. The traveler followed her lead, careful to move with measured steps, respecting the space and pace of the warriors. As they approached, several of the younger warriors nodded or smiled at him, gestures of acceptance and camaraderie. He returned the greetings, feeling a sense of belonging that had grown steadily over the past days. Their first task was a tracking exercise. The warriors split into smaller groups, each assigned to locate signs of wildlife, understand the terrain, and demonstrate patience and observation. The traveler joined a group led by the elder he had come to respect most. They moved silently through the valley, pointing out broken branches, faint footprints, and subtle changes in the soil. Every detail mattered, and the traveler quickly realized that his previous lessons had prepared him well. The elder spoke in short, deliberate phrases, punctuated by gestures and demonstration. Though the traveler could not understand the words fully, he grasped the intent: observe carefully, act respectfully, and anticipate the movements of both animals and people. Each step through the valley felt like a lesson in humility and awareness, and he felt the connection between the land, its inhabitants, and the warrior culture deepening with every passing moment. After hours of tracking, the group returned to the clearing with small findings, signs of deer, rabbits, and other wildlife. The travelers' group shared their observations, comparing notes with other groups. The giant woman observed silently, occasionally nodding, guiding the warriors subtly, ensuring that each participant, including the traveler, had contributed and learned from the experience. Next came a horseback exercise. The traveler had been hesitant at first, unsure of his ability to handle the animal with skill and respect. But the giant woman gestured patiently, guiding him to mount a strong, calm horse. A young warrior helped steady the animal, and the traveler gripped the reins with care, focusing on balance, posture, and the rhythm of the horse's steps. The group set off across the valley, moving through rocky paths and open plains. The traveler struggled initially, unsure of when to guide the horse or when to let instinct take over. Yet with encouragement from the warriors and subtle gestures from the giant woman, he began to find his rhythm. The wind on his face, the pounding of hooves against the earth, and the sense of movement through the wild valley filled him with exhilaration. He realized that this was more than a physical exercise. It was a lesson in trust, coordination, and connection with another living being. By midday, the travelers' group returned to the clearing, sweat and dust marking the effort, but smiles and laughter spreading across faces. The giant woman gestured for the traveler to approach, guiding him to observe the warriors as they shared knowledge about the terrain, the animals, and strategies for moving undetected through the valley. It was clear that each skill practiced was tied to survival, tradition, and respect for the land. The afternoon brought a cultural ritual. The warriors gathered around the fire, performing movements and chants that had been passed down through generations. The traveler was invited to participate, mimicking gestures, rhythm, and timing. Though imperfect, his efforts were met with patience and encouragement, and the giant woman nodded in approval. He began to understand that rituals were not only symbolic, they were lessons in unity, mindfulness, and connection to the past. Later, the traveler assisted in preparing provisions for a small hunting expedition. He learned to identify edible plants, gather supplies efficiently, and respect the balance of nature. The young warriors guided him patiently, showing him how to move quietly, avoid disturbing the environment, and maintain awareness of both animals and fellow hunters. Every action, he realized, had purpose and meaning. By evening, the valley had transformed from a landscape of observation into a living classroom. The traveler had moved from outsider to participant, learning the skills, rituals, and nuances that defined the warrior way of life. The giant woman observed quietly, her presence a reminder of guidance, authority, and protection. She had allowed him to test his abilities, challenge himself, and now fully integrate into the rhythms of the valley. As night fell, fires were lit, horses tended, and the warriors shared stories of past hunts, battles, and lessons learned. The traveler sat among them, listening intently, offering gestures of understanding and respect. Laughter occasionally rippled through the group, signaling trust, acceptance, and the formation of genuine bonds. The giant woman's eyes reflected pride and quiet satisfaction. She had not only tested the traveler but now welcomed him as an active participant in their world. Before sleep, the giant woman gestured toward the horizon, indicating the tasks of the coming day. The traveler felt anticipation, curiosity, and determination. He had learned much, yet he knew that each day would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to deepen his understanding of courage, respect, and the intricate life of the warriors. The valley rested under the starry sky, its inhabitants settled into quiet rhythms, and the traveler reflected on the extraordinary journey he had begun. From observer to participant, from outsider to accepted member, he realized that the lessons of this valley, patience, courage, respect, and connection, would remain with him long after the journey ended. As the evening shadows lengthened, the warriors decided to conduct a small training hunt near the outer edges of the valley. The traveler, eager to continue learning, followed closely, guided by the giant woman and a few experienced warriors. This hunt was not merely about catching prey. It was a test of stealth, strategy, and harmony with the land, a crucial lesson for anyone wishing to be fully accepted among them. The group moved silently through narrow passes and rocky terrain, each warrior blending seamlessly with the shadows and the natural contours of the valley. The traveler did his best to mimic their movements, lowering his center of gravity, listening carefully to every sound, and observing how each warrior positioned themselves in relation to the others. Even a small misstep could disturb the environment and alert the prey, but the giant woman's subtle guidance reassured him. They paused near a small clearing where signs of deer tracks were visible. One of the younger warriors knelt, tracing the footprints and pointing toward the direction of travel. The traveler crouched beside him, imitating his movements. He learned to read subtle signs, broken twigs, flattened grass, and the pattern of hoofprints. The warriors communicated in soft whispers, gestures, and eye contact, conveying strategy without disrupting the stillness of the valley. The hunt progressed slowly, each step deliberate. The traveler experienced the thrill of anticipation mixed with tension, aware that this was as much a lesson in patience as in skill. Hours passed, the sun lowering steadily, when finally the group spotted a small herd grazing in the distance. The elder nodded, signaling that the traveler could take a position. His heart raced, but he remembered the teachings: focus, respect for the animals, and awareness of the environment. Using the bow the giant woman had entrusted to him, the traveler prepared to release the arrow. He exhaled slowly, adjusted his aim, and let the string fly. Though he did not strike perfectly, the arrow landed near the target, earning a nod of approval from the elder. The warriors smiled subtly, acknowledging his growing competence and careful attention to the lessons they had imparted. After the hunt, the group returned to the clearing to prepare the provisions. The traveler assisted in cleaning and organizing the catch, learning about resourcefulness, sustainability, and the respectful use of every part of the animal. Each task reinforced the interconnectedness of life in the valley and the importance of gratitude, care, and responsibility. Later, the warriors performed a ritual around the fire, celebrating the success of the hunt and honoring the animals that had provided sustenance. The traveler participated, mimicking gestures and movements, feeling the rhythm and significance of the ceremony. Though he could not understand every word or chant, he sensed the respect, unity, and cultural depth embedded in the ritual. The giant woman remained close, observing and guiding subtly, ensuring that the traveler fully grasped both the technical and symbolic aspects of the activities. Her presence reminded him that every action had meaning, and that being accepted among the warriors required more than skill. It required awareness, humility, and the willingness to learn continuously. As night settled over the valley, the travelers gathered near the fires, sharing stories and reflecting on the day's lessons. The traveler felt a sense of accomplishment and connection. He had not only participated in the hunt and rituals but had begun to earn the trust and respect of the warriors, bridging the gap between outsider and valued member. Before sleep, the giant woman gestured toward the horizon, indicating that the coming days would bring new challenges, hunts, and lessons. The traveler lay beneath the starry sky, reflecting on the extraordinary journey so far. He had entered the valley as a stranger, tested his courage, and now actively participated in the life of the warriors. Each day deepened his understanding of patience, respect, and the profound bond between humans, animals, and the land. The dawn broke with a pale light spilling over the jagged cliffs of the valley. Mist clung to the hillsides, curling around trees and rocks, giving the landscape an ethereal quality. The traveler rose quickly, excitement and nervous anticipation coursing through him. Today was different. It was the first major hunt, a test not only of his skill but also of his judgment, courage, and ability to work alongside the warriors as an equal. The giant woman appeared silently, her towering form framed against the rising sun. She gestured toward the warriors assembling at the edge of the clearing, their expressions focused and disciplined. Horses were saddled, weapons checked, and packs carefully arranged. The traveler felt the weight of the moment. He had learned much in the valley, yet this hunt would push him beyond observation and minor tasks. He would now face real challenges with real consequences. The group moved silently through the valley, following the patterns of the terrain, scanning for signs of wildlife. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. The giant woman occasionally glanced back, ensuring the traveler mirrored the warrior's stealth and attentiveness. The valley was alive with sound, the distant rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind over rocks, but every footfall, every gesture, demanded respect for both the land and the creatures within it. Soon, the group spotted a herd of elk grazing near a distant ridge. The warriors slowed, signaling the traveler to observe and position himself carefully. He remembered the lessons of patience, focus, and precision. Using the bow he had been entrusted with, he adjusted his stance, breathing deeply, and prepared to take the shot. Though his hands trembled slightly, he reminded himself that the hunt was not about pride, it was about respect, strategy, and survival. A young warrior whispered guidance, showing him the angle of approach and how to remain unseen. The traveler nodded, moving quietly, every sense alert. When he finally released the arrow, it struck near the target, not perfect, but effective. The elder gave a subtle nod of approval, and the giant woman's eyes reflected pride. The first part of the hunt was complete, yet the challenge was far from over. The group continued along the ridge, now navigating more treacherous terrain, steep cliffs, loose rocks, and narrow paths. Each step demanded balance and coordination, and the traveler relied on every lesson learned in the past days. The giant woman guided him subtly, adjusting his stance, reminding him to respect both the land and the warriors beside him. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the group encountered signs of a rival predator, a wolf pack that could threaten both livestock and warriors if not handled carefully. The giant woman gestured for caution, signaling that this part of the hunt was also a test of judgment and leadership. The traveler felt a surge of adrenaline, understanding that the challenge was now as much moral as physical. He had to decide whether to engage, avoid, or distract the predator without causing unnecessary harm. He observed the wolves from a distance, noting their movements and potential paths. The warriors whispered strategies through gestures and eye contact. The traveler chose a careful approach, guiding the group to avoid confrontation while still completing the objectives of the hunt. The elder's approving nod and the subtle smiles from other warriors confirmed that he had made the right choice, demonstrating wisdom, patience, and restraint. By late afternoon, the hunt reached its final stage. The traveler and a small team were tasked with tracking a lone elk that had separated from the herd. Every sound, shadow, and movement mattered. The giant woman remained at a distance, watching, ensuring that the hunter maintained respect for the land and the creature. The traveler moved slowly, calculating every step, every breath, until he reached a suitable position. He released the arrow with careful precision, striking the target in a way that ensured both efficiency and respect. The elk fell, and the group approached, handling the animal with reverence and gratitude. The giant woman nodded approvingly at the traveler, signaling that he had successfully completed the trial. The hunters prepared the provisions, showing the traveler how to utilize every part of the animal responsibly, a lesson in respect, sustainability, and humility. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group returned to the valley. Fires were lit, horses tended, and warriors shared stories of past hunts and lessons learned. The traveler, exhausted but exhilarated, realized the depth of the day's experiences. He had faced physical challenges, tested his courage, and demonstrated moral judgment under pressure. The giant woman's presence and guidance had been constant, her lessons intertwined with every movement and decision. That night, as the valley rested under a sky ablaze with stars, the traveler sat near the fire with the warriors, reflecting on the day. He understood that true mastery in this world required more than skill. It demanded patience, respect, empathy, and a willingness to learn continuously. The hunt had tested him in ways he had never imagined, yet it had also solidified his growing connection with the valley and its people. The giant woman gestured toward the horizon, silently conveying that tomorrow would bring new lessons, further challenges, and deeper integration into the lives of the warriors. The traveler lay beneath the stars, contemplating the balance of courage, skill, and respect he had witnessed and enacted. He knew that this trial was not the end but a pivotal step in a journey of growth, understanding, and acceptance. The morning sun crested the jagged cliffs of the valley, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The traveler rose early, muscles still aching from the previous day's hunt, but his mind alert and focused. Today marked the beginning of a more advanced stage of his integration, patrolling the outer edges of the valley alongside the warriors. It was not merely a test of skill, but of teamwork, strategy, and situational awareness. The giant woman appeared silently, her towering presence commanding attention. She gestured for him to follow, leading him to a line of warriors already mounted on horses. Each rider was equipped for the patrol: bows, spears, and packs containing provisions and survival tools. The traveler felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This patrol would require coordination and communication at a level beyond previous exercises. The group moved in careful formation, advancing along narrow ridges and through dense patches of forest. Every movement was deliberate, each warrior attentive to the terrain and to one another. The traveler mimicked their posture, holding the reins lightly, keeping his gaze sharp, and his senses tuned to subtle sounds: the snap of a twig, the distant rustle of leaves, or the call of a bird signaling movement nearby. The first challenge arose when they encountered a partially obstructed pass, where loose rocks threatened to destabilize the horses. The giant woman signaled a halt, her eyes scanning the terrain. One of the younger warriors approached the traveler, demonstrating how to shift his weight, guide the horse's footing, and maintain balance while moving slowly across treacherous ground. The traveler followed carefully, each step reinforcing lessons in caution, patience, and attention to detail. As they progressed deeper into the valley, signs of wildlife and previous travelers became evident: footprints, broken branches, and remnants of fires. The warriors paused frequently, analyzing each clue, whispering through gestures and subtle signals. The traveler learned to read these signs, understanding the movement of animals and humans alike, and began to anticipate potential risks or opportunities for strategic advantage. Midway through the patrol, the group encountered a natural challenge: a narrow cliffside path with sheer drops on one side and jagged rocks on the other. The giant woman gestured toward the traveler, signaling that he must lead a small section of the patrol. His heart raced, but he recalled the lessons in focus, balance, and observation. He guided the warriors carefully, communicating through gestures, eye contact, and subtle hand movements, ensuring that each rider maintained safe spacing and stability. The successful navigation earned him quiet nods of approval from the elders and smiles from the younger warriors. Later, the patrol reached a vantage point overlooking the valley's perimeter. The travelers paused, scanning the horizon for potential threats or opportunities. The giant woman instructed the traveler to observe patterns in the landscape: the flow of water, the placement of rocks, and even the behavior of distant animals. She conveyed, without words, that understanding the environment was as crucial as skill with weapons or strategy. The traveler felt a deeper connection to the valley, seeing it not just as a home for the warriors, but as a living, breathing entity that required respect and understanding. The patrol continued with intermittent exercises in stealth and reconnaissance. The traveler learned how to approach silently, how to blend with shadows, and how to anticipate potential hazards. Occasionally, they simulated encounters with rival groups or predators, testing their readiness and decision-making. Each scenario demanded teamwork, coordination, and quick thinking, and the traveler found himself relying on both intuition and lessons learned from the giant woman. By late afternoon, the patrol approached a small river crossing, a known route for both wildlife and potential intruders. The group spread out strategically, each warrior assigned a position to monitor while maintaining communication through subtle signals. The traveler was tasked with observing the riverbank, identifying tracks, and signaling potential movement. He focused intently, noting disturbances in the mud and patterns in the grass, gradually learning to predict the movement of both animals and humans. The patrol concluded as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the valley. The travelers returned to the central clearing, tired but accomplished. Fires were lit, horses tended, and warriors shared observations from the day. The traveler felt a profound sense of achievement. He had not only participated in the patrol but had contributed actively, earning the respect and trust of the warriors. That evening, the giant woman guided the traveler to a quiet spot near the fire. She gestured toward the horizon, indicating that the lessons of the day were part of a continuous journey, one of observation, strategy, and connection to both the warriors and the land itself. The traveler reflected on his growth, from a hesitant observer to an active participant capable of leading, communicating, and making decisions in the midst of complex situations. As the stars blanketed the valley, the traveler understood that the patrol had taught him more than skill and strategy. It had shown him the value of trust, collaboration, and situational awareness. The giant woman's guidance, combined with the experience of working closely with the warriors, had deepened his understanding of courage, patience, and the interconnectedness of all life in the valley. The valley settled into a calm rhythm for the night, the warriors resting and sharing quiet stories. The traveler lay beneath the stars, reflecting on the day's lessons, and felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. The giant woman's presence, constant yet unobtrusive, reminded him that each day brought new challenges, and with each challenge, an opportunity to grow, learn, and strengthen his bond with the valley and its extraordinary inhabitants. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, painting the valley in soft hues of gold and green. The traveler rose, his body still fatigued from the rigorous patrols and hunts of the previous days, yet his mind was sharp, anticipating the tasks ahead. Today, the warriors planned a more complex mission, a long-range patrol combined with a strategic observation of potential intruders near the valley's borders. The giant woman appeared silently, her towering form silhouetted against the rising sun. She gestured for him to prepare quickly, emphasizing alertness and readiness. The traveler mounted his horse alongside the other warriors, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him. Unlike previous missions, today's journey required constant vigilance, quick thinking, and collaborative strategy. Every decision would matter. The patrol moved in disciplined formation, advancing through narrow ridges, dense foliage, and rocky terrain. The traveler observed carefully, learning to anticipate the movements of his companions and the rhythm of the environment. Birds fluttered overhead, wind whispered through leaves, and distant streams gurgled, each sound a potential signal or warning. The giant woman occasionally glanced back, confirming that he was attentive, poised, and responsive. Hours into the patrol, the group encountered a surprise. Signs of another group, human tracks, broken branches, and faint smoke from a distant campfire, indicated that outsiders had entered the valley's territory. The warriors froze, assessing the situation through gestures, eye contact, and subtle movements. The traveler felt his pulse quicken. This was the first real test of his judgment under pressure, a challenge that demanded courage, observation, and strategic thinking. The giant woman gestured subtly, signaling for him to observe, interpret, and act when appropriate. The traveler noticed the faint footprints leading toward a narrow gorge, likely a passage the intruders intended to use. He pointed with a careful gesture, drawing attention to the potential path. The elder nodded, approving his observation, and the warriors began to reposition themselves strategically to monitor the movement. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the gorge. One of the intruders had spotted movement and was approaching quickly. The warriors tensed, ready to respond. The traveler's heart raced, but he remembered the lessons he had learned: patience, observation, and respect for both the land and the creatures within it. Acting impulsively could endanger the group or provoke conflict unnecessarily. He guided a small team alongside the elder, quietly intercepting the intruders while the rest of the warriors flanked the area to prevent escape. Every movement required precision and calm, every decision balanced courage with wisdom. The traveler communicated through gestures, positioning, and subtle cues, ensuring that the intruders were contained without unnecessary harm. The confrontation was tense but brief. The intruders, realizing they were outnumbered and strategically surrounded, backed down. The elder approached, speaking through gestures and pointing toward the valley, conveying a warning that was both firm and just. The traveler observed carefully, understanding the subtle dynamics of power, respect, and negotiation within the warrior code. After the intruders retreated, the patrol continued along the valley's perimeter. The traveler reflected on the challenge he had just faced. Unlike previous exercises, this was not a controlled test but a real-world scenario requiring quick thinking, collaboration, and moral judgment. He had navigated the tension successfully, earning not only the respect of the warriors but a deeper understanding of responsibility, leadership, and the delicate balance between courage and restraint. As they returned to the central clearing, the warriors gathered to discuss the day's events. The traveler listened intently, offering gestures of agreement, acknowledgement, and subtle insight where appropriate. The giant woman observed him closely, her expression reflecting approval and quiet pride. He had faced his first major real-world challenge in the valley and had responded with patience, strategy, and courage. That evening, fires were lit, provisions prepared, and the warriors shared stories and reflections from the day. The traveler, exhausted but exhilarated, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had moved beyond observation and basic participation to become an active, trusted member capable of contributing meaningfully to the group's safety, strategy, and cohesion. The giant woman gestured toward the horizon, indicating that tomorrow would bring new challenges, lessons, and opportunities. The traveler lay beneath the stars, reflecting on the unexpected confrontation, the decisions he had made, and the trust he had earned. He understood that every day in the valley was a step toward mastery, not only of skill but of courage, wisdom, and respect. As night deepened, the valley settled into a quiet rhythm. The traveler felt a profound sense of belonging, knowing that he had faced a true test and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the extraordinary people and land around him. The giant woman's silent guidance had been crucial, and her lessons, woven through observation, challenge, and participation, would continue to shape his journey in the valley. The valley was unusually quiet that morning, the kind of silence that preceded a storm or a momentous event. The traveler awoke with a sense of anticipation and unease. Today, he would face a defining challenge, one that would test everything he had learned: his courage, skill, judgment, and respect for both the warriors and the land. The giant woman appeared at dawn, her silhouette outlined by the rising sun. She gestured for him to prepare quickly, indicating that this mission required alertness, strategy, and unwavering focus. The traveler mounted his horse, checking his bow and gear, aware that this task would push him beyond his previous limits. The warriors were already assembled, their expressions serious, their movements precise. Today was no ordinary patrol, it was a decisive operation. The mission was to track and intercept a group of outsiders who had been observed near the valley's northern border. Reports suggested they were intent on hunting the valley's game unlawfully, posing a threat to both resources and the warriors' territory. The traveler's role was crucial. He had to use his observation skills, judgment, and recently learned leadership abilities to navigate both physical and moral challenges. The patrol moved silently, each step deliberate, each horse carefully placed. The giant woman occasionally signaled guidance through subtle gestures, ensuring the traveler stayed aware of his surroundings while maintaining composure. Hours passed as the group navigated rocky passes, dense forests, and river crossings. Every movement demanded coordination, balance, and acute attention to detail. Finally, signs of the outsiders appeared: broken branches, faint footprints, and a hastily abandoned campfire. The group paused, assessing the situation. The giant woman gestured toward a small ridge overlooking the intruder's path. The traveler understood immediately. This was a test of patience and strategic thinking. Any impulsive action could provoke a confrontation, while careful planning could achieve their goal without unnecessary conflict. The traveler observed the intruders closely, noting their movements, weapons, and potential intentions. He communicated through gestures to the warriors, pointing out paths of approach and possible hazards. The elders nodded approvingly, acknowledging his growing understanding and leadership. The tension was palpable. The stakes were higher than anything he had faced before. As they prepared to intercept, the intruders unexpectedly split into two groups. One group moved toward a narrow gorge, while the other veered along the riverbank. The traveler had to decide quickly how to allocate the warriors, ensuring both safety and effectiveness. Drawing on lessons learned during patrols and hunts, he coordinated small teams, positioning them strategically to cover both paths while remaining hidden. The first confrontation occurred near the gorge. The traveler and a small team approached silently, using the terrain for cover. The intruders were unaware of their presence until carefully signaled. The traveler's heart raced, but he focused on maintaining calm and precision. They managed to block the intruders' path without direct conflict, forcing them to reconsider their actions. The giant woman's approving nod reinforced his confidence. Meanwhile, the other team, guided indirectly by the traveler's signals, intercepted the second group near the river. Once again, careful observation and strategic positioning prevented unnecessary conflict. The intruders, realizing they were surrounded and outmaneuvered, attempted to retreat. The traveler's instructions ensured the warriors acted with restraint, preventing harm while asserting authority. The defining moment came when the intruders' leader tried to flee across a slippery rock formation. The traveler recognized the danger, not just for the intruder but for the entire group if anyone lost footing. He acted quickly, signaling the warriors to assist in guiding the intruder safely without confrontation. With precise coordination, they managed to neutralize the threat safely, ensuring no one was harmed. After the mission, the group regrouped at a high vantage point overlooking the valley. The giant woman gestured toward the traveler, signaling both pride and acknowledgement of his role. He had demonstrated courage, strategy, patience, and moral judgment under extreme pressure. The elders and warriors acknowledged him with nods, subtle smiles, and quiet gestures of approval. He had truly earned his place among them, not merely as an observer or participant, but as a trusted member capable of leadership. As they returned to the central clearing, the atmosphere was a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet celebration. Fires were lit, provisions distributed, and warriors shared stories of past missions, drawing parallels to today's challenge. The traveler listened attentively, understanding the depth of responsibility, teamwork, and respect that governed the lives of these warriors. The giant woman approached him once more, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. Though no words were spoken, the gesture conveyed acknowledgement, pride, and trust. The traveler reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from cautious observation to active participation, through tests of skill, courage, and moral judgment, to now being recognized as a capable and trusted member of the warrior community. That night, under the canopy of stars, the traveler contemplated the lessons of the defining challenge. Courage was not just action in the face of danger, it was patience, observation, and thoughtful decision-making. Leadership was not merely issuing commands, it was understanding the terrain, the people, and the consequences of every action. Respect for life, land, and tradition guided every decision, ensuring harmony and continuity. The valley, quiet and serene under the night sky, seemed to embrace him. The giant woman's guidance, the warrior's mentorship, and the experiences of the past days had shaped him profoundly. He realized that his journey was far from over, but he had crossed a threshold, a point of no return where he had earned trust, respect, and belonging in this extraordinary community. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, further hunts, and deeper lessons in the ways of the valley, but tonight, he rested knowing he had faced a true test, acted with courage and wisdom, and proven himself among the warriors. The defining challenge had not only tested his abilities but had also transformed him, marking him as an integral part of the valley and its extraordinary people. The valley awoke to a soft, golden light, the cliffs and trees bathed in the glow of dawn. The traveler rose, feeling a deep sense of anticipation mixed with calm. Today marked the culmination of his journey in the valley, the final stage where his lessons, tests, and experiences would converge into mastery. The giant woman stood silently nearby, her towering presence a steady reminder of guidance, trust, and the responsibility that now rested upon him. The warriors had gathered in the central clearing, a sign that today would be different. Unlike previous exercises or missions, this day was about demonstration and integration. showing that the traveler had not only survived the tests but had internalized the values, skills, and traditions of the valley. Every warrior's gaze was focused on him, a mixture of respect, curiosity, and quiet expectation. The first demonstration involved observation and awareness. The traveler moved through a designated path, carefully noting subtle changes in the terrain, the placement of rocks, and signs of wildlife. Every step was deliberate, every gesture intentional. The warriors observed in silence, and even the giant woman's imposing presence seemed to fade into the background, allowing his actions to speak. He identified faint tracks, subtle disturbances, and potential hazards that even some seasoned warriors had missed. Each observation was accurate, deliberate, and informed by lessons learned from countless days of training and participation. Next came a test of skill and coordination. The traveler was asked to perform a series of tasks involving archery, climbing, and strategic positioning, each designed to demonstrate mastery of both physical and cognitive skills. He moved fluidly, recalling the techniques taught by the giant woman and the elders, balancing precision with efficiency. Arrows struck targets, climbing maneuvers were executed with care, and tactical positioning impressed even the most experienced warriors. He had not only learned but had integrated the wisdom of observation, focus, and patience into his actions. The third component of the final demonstration focused on leadership and moral judgment. The giant woman presented a complex scenario, a simulated threat approaching the valley, requiring careful decision-making, coordination, and ethical choices. The traveler analyzed the situation, allocating warriors to key positions, anticipating outcomes, and balancing risk with caution. His instructions were clear, deliberate, and effective, resulting in a successful neutralization of the simulated threat without unnecessary conflict. The elders nodded in approval, and subtle smiles spread among the younger warriors. Afterward, the traveler participated in a ritual that symbolized acceptance and mastery. The warriors formed a circle, performing movements, chants, and gestures that had been passed down through generations. The traveler followed seamlessly, embodying not only the motions but the intent behind them. He felt a profound connection to the warriors, the land, and the traditions that had guided this extraordinary community for centuries. The giant woman watched closely, her expression one of quiet pride and satisfaction. The culmination of the day involved a symbolic hunt, representing mastery of skill, courage, and respect. The traveler led a small group into the outer reaches of the valley, navigating terrain that had challenged him in the past. Every movement was deliberate, every decision thoughtful. He demonstrated patience, precision, and strategic thinking, guiding the group to a successful hunt while ensuring minimal disturbance to the environment and the animals. This act represented the integration of all lessons: observation, courage, respect, and wisdom. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple, the traveler returned to the central clearing. The warriors gathered around him, offering gestures of acknowledgement, respect, and quiet celebration. The giant woman approached, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent gesture of pride and affirmation. She had guided him from the moment he arrived, through tests of courage, hunts, patrols, challenges, and moral dilemmas, and now she acknowledged that he had achieved mastery. That evening, under the vast canopy of stars, the traveler reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first day, filled with uncertainty and hesitation, the cautious observation of warriors, and the initial tests of courage and skill. He recalled the hunts, patrols, and unexpected challenges, each shaping his understanding of patience, respect, and strategy. Now, he stood as a fully integrated member of the warrior community, recognized not only for his skill but for his character, judgment, and willingness to learn. The giant woman gestured toward the horizon, indicating that while this stage had concluded, the journey of growth and learning would continue. The traveler understood this clearly. Mastery was not a final destination but a state of ongoing awareness, respect, and dedication. Every day in the valley would present new challenges, opportunities, and lessons, and he was now prepared to meet them with courage, wisdom, and integrity. The warriors shared stories around the fire, laughter and camaraderie filling the clearing. The traveler joined seamlessly, contributing insights, gestures, and observations, fully accepted as one of their own. The bond he had formed with the giant woman, the elders, and the younger warriors was now unbreakable, a combination of trust, respect, and shared experience that transcended words. As night deepened, the traveler lay beneath the stars, contemplating the journey from outsider to master. He felt gratitude for the lessons, guidance, and experiences that had shaped him. He realized that the valley was not merely a place of tests and challenges, but a living, breathing community that taught the value of courage, respect, wisdom, and connection. The final thought that filled his mind was simple yet profound. True mastery is not measured solely by skill or accomplishment, but by the ability to act with awareness, respect, and integrity in every situation. The valley had tested him, shaped him, and welcomed him, and he knew he would carry these lessons with him forever. The giant woman stood nearby, her gaze sweeping across the valley. Though she said nothing, the traveler felt her acknowledgement, pride, and trust. The journey was complete, but the path ahead remained open, filled with new challenges, growth, and experiences. He had become part of something greater than himself, a community, a tradition, and a way of life that would endure for generations. As the fires died down and the stars shone brightly above, the traveler closed his eyes, finally feeling at peace. He had faced tests, dangers, and moral dilemmas, had grown in skill, courage, and wisdom, and had earned a place among the warriors. The valley had transformed him, and in turn, he had honored it with his courage, respect, and integrity. The story of the traveler had reached its resolution, yet his journey, like the valley itself, would continue, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of tomorrow.